The terrifying cemetery stories you're about to hear will prove that behind every gravestone, there's far more than just memories. Places meant to be havens of rest and peace often hide dark secrets, unexplainable mysteries, and encounters that defy all reason, like in the story you're about to hear, where a young man working in a peaceful cemetery discovers that its quiet facade conceals gruesome rituals and a shocking crime that will never be solved. But before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you never miss a terrifying tale. I never imagined I'd end up working in a cemetery. But you know how it is. Life has a funny way of placing you where you least expect it. My dad bought this place a few years back. A vast expanse of land filled with twisted trees that seemed to whisper ancient secrets and tombstones worn by time, like rotten teeth jutting out from the earth. He always said it was an investment, a peaceful place for the living and the dead. And well, someone had to take care of it. So here I am, gardening, mowing the lawn, cleaning the crypts. Yes, crypts. This cemetery has a few of them, the kind that look like they stepped right out of a nightmare. They're cold, so cold that the air seems to cut your skin, and dark, as if the light is afraid to enter. Every step you take inside echoes, and the sound seems to murmur something you can't quite understand, something that makes you want to run, but your feet stay glued to the ground. The cemetery itself is quiet most of the time. Sure, there are those moments when you catch a shadow moving out of the corner of your eye, or hear a strange noise coming from behind a tree. But generally, it's just the wind. At least, that's what I prefer to believe. Sometimes when I'm alone out there, I stop and look around. All those tombstones, names erased by time, stories no one remembers. And the crypts, those give me a chill that runs down my spine and stays there, like an icy finger touching the back of my neck. When I open one for a new burial, the cold air seems to come straight from the ground, as if the cemetery itself is breathing, as if it's alive. Inside the crypts, there's a bit of everything. Some contain the ashes of entire families, with candles no one has lit in decades and old photos that seem to follow you with their gaze. It's strange, you know? You go in there and feel the weight of history, of mortality. I always end up thinking that one day I'll be on the other side of all this. Maybe in a crypt, maybe in a simple grave. Death doesn't choose, it just comes. And when you work in a place like this, that reality becomes closer, more tangible. Sometimes I swear I feel something watching me, something not human. But it's not like I spend all my time thinking about it. Most of the time, it's just ordinary work. Until last summer, when things started to become different. My friend Charlie and I were working as cemetery caretakers. He's a quiet guy, not easily spooked. But that summer, even he started watching every shadow, every noise. The air seemed heavier, as if the cemetery was holding its breath, waiting for something. And that's when everything started to change. But that's a story for another time. That summer, the cemetery seemed quieter than usual. I don't know if it was because of the stifling heat, or if it was just my imagination, but the air felt heavier, as if the place was holding its breath. Charlie and I were doing the usual maintenance, mowing the lawn, cleaning the tombstones, pulling weeds that insisted on growing between the stones. But suddenly we started noticing strange things. Objects left on the graves. Things that shouldn't have been there. Half-empty bottles of alcohol. Candles burned down to the wick. Wilted flowers tied with black ribbons. None of this was normal. People who visit the cemetery usually leave fresh flowers, letters, sometimes a small saint's picture. But this looked like something else, as if someone was using the cemetery for something more sinister, something that shouldn't be disturbed. One day, while we were cleaning near the oldest crypts, Charlie called me over. He was standing in front of a grave, staring at something on the ground. When I approached, I saw what it was. A doll, but not just any doll. It was an old porcelain doll with a burned face and nails driven into its eyes. Its hair was tangled, and its dress, which must have been white once, was dirty and torn, as if it had been ripped straight out of a nightmare. "What is that?" I asked. But Charlie just shook his head, not taking his eyes off the doll. "I don't know, but it's nothing good," he replied, his voice lower than usual, almost a whisper. We stood there, staring at the doll, not knowing what to do. It seemed alive, in a way, as if it was watching us, even without eyes. And the strangest thing was how it had been placed. Someone had put it there intentionally, like part of a ritual or a macabre joke. I didn't know what was worse, the idea that someone had done it for fun, or the possibility that it was serious, something we shouldn't have touched. Eventually, we decided to take the doll out of the cemetery and throw it far away. But even after getting rid of it, the bad feeling didn't go away. It was as if the doll had left something behind, a heavy energy that clung to our skin, like an invisible stain that wouldn't wash off, no matter how hard we tried to ignore it. And looking back now, I think that's when things really started to go wrong. It was as if we had touched something we shouldn't have, something that was sleeping and had now awakened. After that doll, the cemetery was never the same. It felt like something had been awakened, something that shouldn't have been. Charlie and I continued to work, but the tension in the air was palpable, as if the air itself was charged with a dark electricity. Every shadow seemed to move. Every noise was a sigh or a footstep behind you. Even the wind, which used to be just wind, now seemed to carry whispers, low voices that you could never quite make out. We tried to ignore it, to keep going, but it was impossible not to feel that something was very wrong. Until one morning we found something that changed everything. We were doing our usual rounds, checking the crypts and the farthest graves, when Charlie suddenly stopped. He was looking at a dark corner near an old tree, one of those that seemed to have roots plunging straight into hell. I approached, and that's when I saw it. The body of a young girl. She was lying face down, her hair disheveled, her hands clenched as if she had tried to hold on to something, someone, before she went. When we turned her over, my heart almost stopped. She had been strangled. Her eyes were wide open, filled with a terror I will never forget. It was as if she was still seeing whatever had done this to her, even in death. The police arrived quickly, sirens shattering the cemetery's silence, but it didn't do much good. The young girl was identified as a student from a nearby school. An ordinary girl, with no enemies, no history. No one knew why she was there in the cemetery that night. And worse, no one knew who had done this to her. What had she seen? What had she felt in her final moments? These questions haunted me day and night. Charlie and I were questioned, of course. Two guys working in a cemetery, finding a body. Obviously, we became suspects, but we had nothing to do with it. The police cleared us, but the case was never solved. To this day, no one knows who killed that girl. And in a way, that was worse than knowing. It was as if the murderer was still out there, watching, waiting. After that, the cemetery was never a peaceful place for me again. Every time I went in, I felt the weight of that death, that violence that didn't belong there. A cemetery should be a place of peace, of rest. But this one was different. It was as if death had become something alive, something that watched, that waited. Sometimes I swore I heard footsteps behind me, or saw a figure in the distance, still among the trees, watching. But when I turned around, there was no one, or at least, no one I could see. I hope the young girl rests in peace wherever she is. But sometimes when I'm alone in the cemetery, I feel like she's still there, stuck in that place, stuck in that night. And deep down, I know that cemetery will never be the same. Not for me, not for anyone. It's as if evil has left a mark, a scar that will never heal. And every time I close my eyes, I see her face, her eyes wide open, the terror frozen in time. What a horror. What did you think of this story? Rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments. The family cemetery, with its macabre rituals and unexplained murders, shows us just how much death can be shrouded in dark mysteries. But what happens when these mysteries go beyond what we can explain? Like in the story you're about to listen, where a mausoleum hides secrets so disturbing that even the living dare not approach. I was 16 when I landed my first job. It wasn't anything glamorous, but back then, anything that could put a little cash in my pocket was worth it. My job, taking care of graves in a rural cemetery, somewhere in Georgia. Yes, a cemetery. And not just any cemetery, one of those really isolated ones surrounded by a dense forest that seemed to swallow everything around it. During the day, it was manageable, but at night, it was a different story. The place had a bone-chilling atmosphere, even for the bravest souls. The wind whistled through the trees and the silence was so heavy, you could hear your own heartbeat. I always had this feeling that someone or something was watching me. But, like any stubborn teen, I told myself it was just my imagination. Until one night everything changed. It was one of those moonless nights when the sky looks like an ink-black sea and the stars struggle to light the ground. I was doing my rounds, old flashlight in hand, when something caught my attention. Over there, near the mausoleum, that old, somewhat abandoned building at the back of the cemetery, I saw flickering lights, candles, lit candles, and even worse, I heard voices, muffled whispers as if someone was talking inside. My blood ran cold. I wasn't the type to believe in ghosts or anything like that, but this had no explanation. The mausoleum was always locked, and I knew no one had gone in all day. I stood paralyzed for a few seconds until my survival instinct kicked in. I ran to the caretaker's cabin, a tough guy who had been a cop before retiring. He was the kind of guy nothing could faze, so I thought, if anyone can help me figure out what's going on, it's him. When I told him what I'd seen, he just raised an eyebrow, grabbed his flashlight and said, "Let's go take a look." We walked to the mausoleum and I swear each step felt heavier than the last. The candles were still lit when we arrived and the door was ajar. The caretaker went in first, and I followed close behind, my flashlight trembling in my hands. Inside, the air was icy, and the smell of mold was so strong it caught in my throat. The candles were placed on a tomb, and that's when things got even stranger. The tomb was open. And inside, well, I'll save that for later, because that's where the story really starts to get creepy. In the open tomb, there was something I never imagined I'd see. A small skeleton, that of a child, and next to it, a rag doll. The doll was old, with half-unraveled button eyes and a dress that was once colorful, but now faded and dirty. It was unsettling. I felt a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the night's temperature. The caretaker, who until then seemed unfazed, took a step back and murmured, "Something's not right." He scanned the mausoleum walls with his flashlight, but there was no one. Nothing. Just us, the skeleton, the doll, and those flickering candles. The voices I'd heard earlier, gone. The silence was so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. "Someone must have broken into the cemetery," he said, trying to stay calm, but I noticed he was a bit shaken too. "Let's take a look around and see if we find anything." We left the mausoleum and started searching for intruders. We scoured the entire cemetery, shining our flashlights into every nook and cranny. Nothing. No sign of life, no sound. Just the dark, silent forest around us, as if it were watching. After an hour of searching, we decided to go back to the mausoleum to close the tomb and make sure everything was locked up tight. But when we went back inside, the doll was no longer in its place. It had been moved. Now it was sitting on a marble table, as if someone had placed it there intentionally. My heart started racing and I felt a pressure in my chest. The caretaker looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "Let's get out of here," he said, and I didn't need him to say it twice. We closed the tomb as fast as we could, blew out the candles, and got the hell out of there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the image of that doll etched in my mind. The next day, I quit. I didn't give many explanations, just said I couldn't do it anymore. The boss tried to convince me to stay, but my mind was made up. After that night, I was never the same. The trauma stayed with me, like a scar that never heals. I tried to move on, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that rag doll sitting on the marble table, as if it were watching me. And the voices, Sometimes I swore I heard whispers in the middle of the night, even far from that cemetery. I never went back, not even to visit. The cemetery and everything that happened that night stayed behind me, but the mystery was never solved. Who opened the tomb? Who lit the candles? And most importantly, who moved the doll? Those questions remain unanswered, and I prefer it that way. Some things are better left in the dark. The caretaker, the ex-cop, never spoke of the incident again. Once, a few months later, I ran into him in town, and he just looked at me with that serious expression and said, "Let it go, kid." And I took his advice. Sometimes curiosity tries to pull me back, but I resist. I don't want to know what else might be hiding in that mausoleum. The doll and the violated tomb remain a mystery to this day. And me? Well, I keep living my life trying not to think too much about that night. But sometimes, when the wind howls and the night is particularly dark, I find myself looking out the window, as if expecting to see a flickering light in the distance. And in those moments, I just tell myself I'm glad to be far from that cemetery. What a chilling story. That mausoleum left us with more questions than answers, showing that some places hold secrets that will never be unraveled. But what happens when the mystery isn't in a place, but in a person? The story you're about to discover is even more personal and disturbing, where a mysterious man seems to have an impossible connection to the past. But before we continue, if you've made it this far, it's because you enjoy our stories. So don't forget to like this video to show YouTube you appreciate this kind of content, and don't miss any of our upcoming horror stories. I've never been the type to visit cemeteries. I always thought the dead didn't need visits, you know? They're gone, and we, the ones left behind, have to move on. But everything changed the day my dad died. It was so sudden that even today when I think about it, it's like reliving a nightmare. A blood clot in the brain, just like that, without warning. One morning he was there, laughing, telling one of those lame jokes only he found funny. And by the afternoon he was gone. His death was like a punch to the gut. When someone is sick, you prepare yourself, even if it's painful. You say goodbye little by little, you understand? But when it happens like that, out of the blue, it's like the ground disappears from under your feet. No time to realize, to understand. It just hurts. And then, when you least expect it, the pain comes back, stronger, like a wave pulling you into the depths. The funeral was strange. Everyone seemed to be in shock. My mom, my uncles, even his closest friends. No one really knew what to say. We were just there, in silence, exchanging glances that said more than words. It was one of those days that seemed to last forever, but pass in the blink of an eye. Before I knew it, I was back home, sitting on the couch, staring into space, trying to understand how everything had happened so fast. And that's how I started visiting his grave. I know, I always said I didn't like cemeteries, but I don't know, maybe I was looking for some kind of comfort, something to help me understand, to accept. And that's when I created a ritual. Every Sunday I'd take a beer, his favorite, that Scottish beer he always drank at family barbecues, and go to the cemetery. I'd sit there next to the headstone and talk to him. I'd tell him about my week, my plans, my worries. It was like he was still there by my side, listening with that patience only he had. And for a while it helped. But then something happened, something that changed everything again. It was one of those Sundays as I sat on the ground, drinking my beer and telling him how his team had lost again, that I saw him, a man dressed all in black, standing a few yards away near my dad's grave. He wasn't doing anything in particular, just looking at the headstone, but something about the scene made me uneasy. Maybe it was his posture, so rigid, or the fact that he was there alone in an almost empty cemetery. I don't know. All I know is that when I stood up to approach him, he suddenly turned around and walked away quickly, almost running. I stood there watching him go, trying to understand what had just happened. Who was that guy? What was he doing here? At first I thought maybe he was a friend of my dad's, an old buddy or something. But if that was the case, why would he run away like that? I thought about it all day, and finally, I decided it was better not to think about it too much. After all, it could have been a misunderstanding, right? A coincidence. Except it wasn't. The following Sunday, he was there again. This time, I had arrived earlier, and he was already there, standing in the same spot, his back to me. He was tall, thin, and wore a long coat, like the ones you see in old movies. I watched him for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to go ask who he was, but another part was scared. Scared of what he might say or what I might find out. Eventually, he left again. And once more, I didn't have the courage to do anything. But the third time, I was ready. This time, I wouldn't let him get away. I arrived even earlier and hid behind a tree, waiting. And sure enough, there he was, again, standing in front of my dad's grave. This time, I approached slowly, trying not to make any noise. But as soon as I took a step, he turned around. And when our eyes met, he started running. I didn't think twice. I chased after him. He was fast, but I knew that cemetery like the back of my hand. I followed him between the graves, turning down narrow paths, until I finally managed to corner him in a dead end. He was facing away from me, breathing hard, and so was I. That's when he turned around, and I almost fell backward. The man had my dad's face, exactly the same 3-day beard, the same tired eyes, even the scar above the left eyebrow, which he had gotten in a car accident when he was young. It was like I was looking at my dad, alive, right in front of me. Except, it wasn't him. Something was off. His expression was different, harder, colder. When he opened his mouth to speak, it was with a strong Scottish accent, an accent my dad had never had. "You shouldn't have come here," he said in a raspy voice that seemed to echo in the empty place. I couldn't respond. I just stood there looking at him, trying to understand what was happening. And before I could react, he turned around and disappeared among the trees, leaving me there, alone, with more questions than answers. I couldn't sleep that night. The face of that man, my dad's face, wouldn't leave my thoughts. How was it possible? A doppelganger? A ghost? A hallucination? I didn't know what to think, but one thing was for sure. I needed answers. The next day, I decided to talk to my mom. She's always been the most down-to-earth person I know, and if anyone could help me understand, it was her. I went to her place feeling a bit uneasy, not sure how to start the conversation. But as soon as I mentioned the man from the cemetery, I saw her face change. She turned pale, and for the first time in my life, I saw my mom speechless. I think you should sit down," she finally said, pointing to a chair in the kitchen. I sat down, and she started telling me a story I had never heard before. According to her, my dad had a twin brother. They had been separated when they were still babies, when their family immigrated from Scotland to Brazil. My grandfather, a very proud man, didn't want to raise 2 children at the same time, so he left one of the babies with a distant family. My mom had only found out about this years later when my dad confessed to her during one of those drunken nights when you end up talking too much. But he had never wanted to find his brother, and she had promised never to tell anyone. "I thought he was dead," she said in a shaky voice. "But from what you're telling me, it sounds like he's alive." I sat there trying to digest all of this. A twin brother? It all made sense, the identical face, the Scottish accent. But at the same time, none of it made sense. Why was he visiting my dad's grave? Why had he run away? And most importantly, why had he never shown up before? I decided I wouldn't be able to rest until I had answers. The following Sunday, I went back to the cemetery, but this time, I didn't take a beer. I took a notebook, a pen, and a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. I sat there waiting, watching every movement. Hours passed, and nothing. The sun began to set, and I was about to give up when I saw him. He was there again, standing in front of my dad's grave. This time I didn't chase after him. I stayed where I was, watching him. He seemed calmer, more sad. After a while, he knelt down and placed a flower on the headstone. That's when I approached him, slowly, trying not to scare him. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice firmer than I expected. He turned to me, and for the first time he didn't run away. He looked me in the eyes, and I saw a pain that was familiar. It was the same pain I felt every time I visited my dad's grave. "I am what remains of him," he replied with that Scottish accent that still sounded so strange to me. "And you are what he left behind." We stood there looking at each other, not sure what to say, and finally he simply turned around and left. This time I didn't follow him. I stayed there, thinking about everything that had happened and everything I still had to discover. Now I'm planning a trip to Scotland. I know it might sound crazy, but I need to understand where I come from and who I am. And who knows, maybe I'll find him. This time, I hope we can talk. Thanks for watching this far. Which story did you like the most? And which one did you like the least? Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps the channel grow, and you won't miss any horror stories.